Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm here to look ahead to Newcastle United's trip to Aston Villa tomorrow. It's currently Monday morning, gloomy outside, about 11 o'clock as I record this. Eddie Howe's just done his news conference and there's lots of updates on transfers, injuries and currently where Newcastle stand. I will look back a little bit at Fulham on Saturday as well, but I was at Bramall Lane to cover Sheffield United against Brighton and did a video from there. On transfers, we will get into it in a little bit later, but I do encourage you once again to go and read my article on the BBC Sport website, big explainer as to why Newcastle are where they are with profit and sustainability rules, why they might have to sell some players, or will have to sell some players before they buy, who they might sell, what the situation is now. Obviously, with Kieran Trippier, there's a little bit more of an update on him in a positive sense for Newcastle, Miguel Almiron, Callum Wilson. But we'll look at what Eddie Howe said in his news conference first, with a bit of an injury update on Joe Willock, Callum Wilson and Harvey Barnes. I can sense a lot of frustration out there from fans on Twitter and just in general when talking about specifically Barnes and Willock, because it seems for weeks that they've been close and getting closer and getting closer, and I think that's just to do with the way Eddie Howe answers questions. It's quite frustrating for journalists. It's been quite fun for supporters at times when it comes to transfers and that sort of thing. It doesn't seem like they're going to be back for a few weeks still. It was very similar with Sven Botman earlier in the season as well. There might be better news on Kieran Trippier, on Miguel Almiron and Jamal Lascelles. Kieran Trippier came off with a slight groin problem against Fulham. Miguel Almiron missed the game through illness, and apparently that was genuine. I was told that was genuine as well from people close to his camp. Aston Villa is going to be a really tough game because the way Newcastle have played away from home, and obviously even on Saturday it was a great result to go through against Fulham. They play at the time of recording either Wrexham or Blackburn. They play tonight in the fifth round of the FA Cup. It was a great result at Fulham, but the performance was not great. Again, it was another passive, slow, sluggish away performance for long spells. From what I read on Twitter and then watched the game back a little bit, from what I saw, Newcastle managed the game in the second half well after Dan Burns' second goal, following on from Sean Longstaff's first in the first half. They took the sting out of the Fulham in later on in the second half, but yeah, there's a sense that it wasn't a great performance. Going into a game at Aston Villa, who are so good at home and play with such intensity, is going to be really, really difficult if you're not at it. Newcastle found it difficult there last year. They lost 3-0. Villa exploited their weaknesses perfectly. I said, if you remember, after the defeat at Brighton as well, that I have a sense that whenever one of the Newcastle, Brighton or Villa go to each other, they'll likely struggle because one team dictates the play of the game and the other team really struggles to match it. And I think that is likely to happen here as well. It's going to be a very, very tough game. Newcastle aren't in the best of shape to go in and win that game, and I do feel like it could be a very tough game. And I'm not one for usually being particularly negative, I think, but I do just get the sense that Newcastle are gonna struggle because they've not been great away from home. They haven't. The Fulham result was only their third win on the road this season, I think, in total. They've only won once away in the Premier League, and that was an 8-0 victory at Sheffield United. Draw would be a superb result. Luton at home next week. Then they've got Nottingham Forest. They've got Chelsea and Arsenal coming up as well between the end of February and March. So some really crunch games. That's when the season is going to restart itself and players are coming back. Newcastle can expect another raucous performance from Aston Villa. They've got the best home record in the league. In fact, they went there and played Newcastle off the pitch when Newcastle were in such good form at the time as well last season. That isn't the case this year. They've struggled at Brighton. I think it could be a very, very tough evening for Newcastle, if I'm honest, and that is something I don't say particularly lightly. It was a very good result against Fulham, but the performance, as I say, was if it was as sluggish as people are saying, and as sluggish as it looked in the first half, and not much has changed in terms of injuries, then it's very difficult to see how Newcastle make a step up. Obviously, they won't have that injection of intensity and pace and energy that Willock would bring them if he was back. They're missing that through Joe Linton. I thought Aston Villa did a superb job in pressurising Bruno Guimaraes in the deep lying role last season at Villa Park. That could very possibly happen again. By the sounds of it, he had a really tough game in the first half at Fulham. There is good news on in terms of injuries from a Villa perspective in Newcastle. Jacob Ramsey isn't likely to be back. He was such a thorn in Newcastle's side in this game last season. There is apparently interest from Newcastle that has been denied by Eddie Howe this morning, but David Ornstein from the Athletics reporting that an approach has been made. I think that's more likely to be seen in the summer. Potentially, they are looking for a more midfield reinforcements. Obviously, the Joe Linton situation with his contract is there. Could be wrong, but it is starting to feel like it could be the summer where things are stepping up. There's 2 days left of the window. Kieran Trippier has reaffirmed his commitment to staying. He was really keen to speak to the press after the Fulham game. Callum Wilson as well, apparently according to Eddie Howe, has been just as strong as Trippier in his commitment. Almiron's the question mark, but I'm again reliably informed that he does not want to leave this January, and Eddie Howe is sort of talking about wanting to keep his squad intact and would prefer that rather than selling a player, which he says is impossible to buy a player without selling. I think by the sounds of it, he would prefer to keep the squad intact than sign a player at the end of this January window. And that does sort of stack up with what I was told earlier in the window about how Newcastle wanted to do their business. It felt more like they were waiting for the summer, and that is in the BBC article that the summer's where the big rebuild will happen. And yes, there's a couple of opportunities that they've maybe missed in terms of getting value and that would have made business sense, but in a footballing sense, you don't want to really rock the boat, especially at this sort of difficult juncture in the season when Newcastle are sort of looking to reinvigorate themselves. It would have been very difficult to do that without Trippier and even Wilson, and Almiron going would put pressure on the last couple of days. So you can understand if that is the case that they don't want to, that they have made that decision not to take those risks. As I say, things can change. It's a very fast moving business, and Eddie Howe doesn't always tell the truth, as I've just said in his press conferences. So we don't know officially what's happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if nothing happens between now and the end of the window. And yeah, I think this is going to be a really tough game for Newcastle at Villa this week before Luton at home on Saturday. Thank you very much for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like what you hear, and I'll see you next time.